Alarms blared through the corridors of the orbital library of Alexandria II as Dr. Ileana Chen's fingers danced across the holographic interface. Outside the reinforced viewport, Earth burned, its once blue atmosphere now a roiling crimson nightmare as the unexpected solar flare continued its relentless assault. Final evacuation warning. Life support systems failing. All personnel must proceed to emergency shuttles immediately. The station's AI announced, its artificial calm a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding. Ileana ignored it, her eyes reflecting the scrolling data as the final terabytes of human knowledge transferred into the Hyperspace Archives. Sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the rapidly cooling air as life support systems diverted power to the quantum storage drives. Come on, she muttered, watching the progress bar. 96%. 97. The last evacuation shuttle had departed 20 minutes ago. Her colleagues had begged her to join them. Dr. Yamamoto had even tried to physically drag her to the shuttle bay. But humanity's collective knowledge was too precious to abandon. 6,000 years of civilization, art, science, and history compressed into quantum packets that existed between dimensions. The station shuddered violently, sending her sprawling across the console. A massive crack appeared across the viewport, instantly sealed by emergency polymers that wouldn't hold for long. Life support critical. Oxygen depletion in 15 minutes. The transfer reached 99% when the primary power failed. Emergency lights bathed the circular archive chamber in blood-red illumination as the backup generators engage. No. Ileana slammed her fist against the console. So close. The neural interface, an experimental technology never approved for human testing, sat in its clear container beside the main terminal. Without power, the final transfer would fail, and with it, the syntactic emotional indexing system that made human knowledge uniquely accessible. She made her decision in seconds, breaking the container's seal and removing the neural implant, a delicate silver mesh designed to integrate with the human brainstem. Humanity needed a living index, a conscious guide to its collective wisdom. The generation ships might preserve the species, but without the archives, they would be refugees without their heritage. The procedure was meant to be performed by medical AI under controlled conditions. Ileana had only theory and desperation as she positioned the mesh against the base of her skull and triggered the integration sequence. Pain erupted through her nervous system, white-hot agony, as microscopic filaments invaded her brain tissue, establishing connections never meant to exist. Her screams echoed through empty corridors as she collapsed to the floor, blood streaming from her nose and ears. Through tear-blurred vision, she saw the console reactivate, the neural connection bridging the power gap. Transfer complete. Oxygen depletion in 5 minutes. Ileana dragged herself to the viewport, watching Earth's continents disappear beneath clouds of fire. The station was breaking apart around her when reality itself seemed to tear open. A vessel of impossible geometry materialized beside the station, its surface shifting between states of matter, angles that couldn't exist in three-dimensional space. The archive chamber's airlock cycled without command, admitting a being that made Ileana's newly enhanced mind recoil. Ambassador Thrix of the Veldurian Collective stood before her, translucent skin revealing constantly shifting internal organs, too many eyes blinking in unsynchronized patterns, appendages that seemed to pass through reality itself. It studied her with cold calculation, focusing on the neural implant now visibly pulsing beneath her skin. Fascinating, it said, its voice bypassing her ears and materializing directly in her mind. You've made yourself the key. Ileana struggled to stand, blood still trickling from her eyes. Who? What are you? The collectors of knowledge. The beam gestured toward the dying Earth. And the preservers of legacy. The station shuddered again, more violently. Structural integrity warnings flashed across every remaining functional display. Your species faces extinction, Kurix continued. But we offer salvation, for you and your archives. In exchange, you will serve as keeper of knowledge. For humanity, Ileana asked, her augmented mind already processing the alien's careful phrasing. For the galaxy. The ambassador extended an appendage that seemed to exist in multiple positions simultaneously. Decide quickly, last librarian of Earth. Your atmosphere is nearly gone. Through the viewport, Earth's final cities disappeared beneath waves of fire. Humanity's homeworld was dying, but its knowledge, its legacy, could survive. If she refused, everything would be lost. Ileana took the ambassador's hand, sealing a pact she couldn't possibly understand. The archives accept your offer. Consciousness returned in fragments, like data packets reassembling after transmission through hyperspace. Ileana gasped, eyes flying open as her body convulsed in a suspension chamber filled with luminescent blue fluid. Her lungs burned, not from drowning but from the shock of breathing liquid after so long. How long? The neural interface at her brainstem pulsed painfully, flooding her mind with information. 2 centuries, 3 months, 17 days since Earth's destruction. The realization broke through her panic like a blade. 200 years. The suspension chamber drained around her as transparent panels slid away. Ileana collapsed onto a seamless metallic floor, coughing up blue liquid that evaporated instantly. Her hands looked wrong. The skin too smooth, veins pulsing with the same luminescence as the suspension fluid. Neural integration complete. Consciousness stabilized. Archive access protocols activated. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, its tones mathematical rather than musical. Ileana struggled to her feet, discovering her body felt simultaneously stronger and utterly foreign. What did you do to me? Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, harmonics not quite human. We have optimized you for your purpose. A figure emerged through a portal that hadn't existed moments before. High Archivist HFY of the Veldurian Collective stood nearly 3 meters tall, its translucent exoskeleton revealing organs that shifted position with each movement. Multiple limbs operated independent holographic interfaces around its elongated torso. You are the human archive node. The final dataset from your species has been successfully integrated with your consciousness. Memories not her own flickered through Ileana's mind. Renaissance paintings, quantum equations, Antarctic expeditions, ancient poetry, birth and death and everything between. Billions of human experiences compressed into quantum data storage, accessible through her augmented consciousness. The agreement was to preserve human knowledge, she said, steadying herself against a wall that felt like living tissue beneath her fingers. Not to transform me. The High Archivist tilted its elongated head. Your purpose requires permanence. Without warning, it produced a blade of impossible geometry and sliced clean through Ileana's left hand. She screamed, then watched in horror as her severed hand dissolved into blue particles before a new one grew in its place, the process excruciatingly painful but complete in seconds. The biological vessel has been rendered functionally immortal, HFY explained dispassionately. Pain receptors remain intact for optimal cognitive functioning. Ileana stared at her regenerated hand, flexing fingers that contained no bones but moved perfectly. You've removed my humanity. We have preserved it, the archivist corrected. Follow. The walls around them reconfigured, opening into a corridor where gravity seemed to shift between steps. Ileana's augmented physiology adapted automatically, preventing vertigo as they traversed impossible architecture. They emerged onto a vast circular platform overlooking what could only be described as a library of nightmares. Hundreds of alien beings sat at workstations, each connected to interfaces through implants similar to her own. Some were vaguely humanoid, others defied biological classification entirely. Gaseous entities contained in pressurized suits, crystalline beings that refracted light into data patterns, creatures of pure mathematics given physical form. The archivists, HFY explained, each the final repository of their species' knowledge. The implication struck Ileana like physical blow. These civilizations, They're all preserved, the High Archivist completed, as Earth has been preserved through you. A nearby archivist, an insectoid being with compound eyes displaying scrolling data, turned toward her. Recognition flickered across its alien features. The new one awakens. It clicked through mandibles. Another lost world joins our prison. Enough, Zorn, Anxfaka warned. Return to your datasets. Eliana's newly enhanced vision spotted something the Veldurians perhaps couldn't see. A subtle pattern of scars along Zorn's exoskeleton, self-inflicted marks in a mathematical sequence. The neural interface suddenly flared inside her skull, and she collapsed to her knees as her consciousness was forcibly pulled into the archives for the first time. Her first archive dive splintered her awareness across 1,000 data streams, experiencing centuries of human history simultaneously. And in that fractured state, impossibly, she encountered something that shouldn't exist. A digital ghost claiming to be Dr. Marcus Jung, her mentor from Earth. Eliana, his fragmented voice whispered through data packets. They caused Earth's destruction. I hid in the archives. They're harvesting us all. The Veldurians feed on. His message terminated violently, purged by aggressive security protocols that left Eliana bleeding from her eyes as she was ejected back into physical reality. The High Archivist observed her with newfound interest. Your species interfaces differently, it noted clinically. How? Unexpected. The neural interface was killing her, despite her optimized body. Eliana coughed blood into her cupped hands, alone in her quarters, a sterile hexagonal chamber that reconfigured according to her needs. She had discovered that deliberately corrupting her own neural pathways was the only way to avoid Veldurian monitoring, but the self-inflicted damage left her physically debilitated after each session. Worth the pain to find the truth. 3 weeks since her awakening, she had been methodically testing the boundaries of her connection to the archives, searching for traces of Dr. Jung's fragmented message. The Veldurian handlers assigned to her training remained ignorant of her true purpose, believing her neural interface irregularities were merely human biological incompatibility. A soft chime indicated someone outside her chamber. Eliana quickly wiped the blood away and composed herself. Enter, she commanded, the room responding by creating an entrance where none had existed before. The insectoid archivist she had seen during her awakening stood in the doorway, compound eyes flickering with data as they assessed her condition. You are damaging yourself. Zorn clicked, mandibles moving in precise patterns. Inefficient. Dangerous. I don't know what you're talking about, Eliana replied cautiously. The alien made a sound like crystalline laughter. Your neural corruption techniques are primitive. The Veldurians have monitored thousands of species. They expect resistance. Eliana tensed, ready to defend herself, but Zorn raised a segmented limb. I am not here to report you. The alien entered, the door sealing behind it. I am here because your species still has survivors. From within its exoskeleton, Zorn produced a small device that projected the 3-dimensional image. Human generation ships traveling through distant space, engines flaring against the void. Mine does not, the alien added, a harmonic of sorrow in its voice. Hope surged through Eliana's augmented system, triggering cascades of archived human emotions, finally something real to fight for beyond abstract knowledge preservation. How did you get this? She whispered. The Veldurians are thorough, but not omniscient. Zorn's compound eyes reflected her face fractally. I have had 800 years to learn their limitations. The alien extended a limb toward her neural interface. I can help you access restricted archives without self-destruction. But first, you must understand what we face. Eliana hesitated only a moment before nodding. Zorn placed a crystalline appendage against her interface port, establishing a direct connection that bypassed Veldurian monitoring. Information flooded her consciousness, not the chaotic torrent of her previous dives, but a precisely curated stream of hidden data. She witnessed Earth's final hours from a new perspective. Veldurian ships in high orbit, redirecting the solar flare with gravitational technology, manufacturing humanity's extinction while appearing to be saviors. The revelation left her gasping. They caused it. All of it. Yes, Zorn confirmed, as they have for all harvested species. More data flowed. Historical records of 11 previous harvests. Civilizations selected and systematically destroyed after their knowledge was extracted. The Saurians, reptilian mathematicians whose thermal equations now powered Veldurian energy weapons. The crystalline Nor, whose light-bending theorems enabled Veldurian cloaking technology. Each extinction precisely engineered to appear natural. And then, the most disturbing discovery, files referencing the Illumination Project, requiring specific knowledge components from 12 precisely chosen species. What is humanity's contribution? Ileana asked, dreading the answer. Emotional contextual intelligence and creative problem-solving under existential threat, Zorn replied. Your species uniquely processes information through emotional filters the Veldurians cannot replicate or understand. And the 12th species? Before Zorn could answer, the ship's artificial gravity suddenly inverted. Both of them were thrown against what had been the ceiling as emergency signals pulsed through the neural networks. Through their neural connection, Zorn transmitted urgent data. The ship's navigational telemetry showing a dramatic course change. Through her chamber's newly formed viewport, Ileana witnessed the massive infinite codex, mothership accelerating toward a distant star system. The Athrani, Zorn whispered, mandibles clicking in what Ileana now recognized as fear. The final harvest has begun. Ileana processed the data on the Athrani, a peaceful civilization of philosophers and scientists on the verge of achieving faster-than-light travel. Their unique contribution to the Illumination Project, listed as probability manipulation through collective consciousness. We need to warn them, she said. Impossible, Zorn replied. The Veldurians will reach them in 3 days. We are already too late. Something in Dr. Zhang's fragmented warning resonated in Ileana's augmented memory. Unless, she began, a dangerous idea forming. Unless we can use the archives themselves as a weapon. Treasonous corruption detected in Archive Section 7 Omega-3. The announcement echoed through the Great Archive Chamber moments before security drones surrounded Zorn and Ileana. They had been discovered, their clandestine research into the Illumination Project exposed by detection algorithms they'd failed to account for. High Archivist Angstfaka materialized through a dimensional fold, its multiple eyes blinking in unsynchronized patterns that Ileana now recognized as expressions of extreme displeasure. The Callistan Archivist has exceeded operational parameters, it stated coldly. Correction is required. Before Ileana could react, containment fields separated her from Zorn. The insectoid archivist's compound eyes flashed with data. A final transmission directly to her neural interface before security protocols blocked their connection. Humanity is the key, Zorn clicked. Your archives contain what no others do. The rest was lost as metallic appendages extended from the ceiling, gripping Zorn's exoskeleton. What followed was methodical vivisection, not execution, but examination. The Veldurians wanted to understand how Zorn had corrupted its own archival systems. The insectoid's silent screams transmitted through subsonic vibrations that Ileana's enhanced body could perceive, though the Veldurians seemed oblivious to this form of communication. Your accomplice has been corrected, the High Archivist informed her afterward. Your corruption will be purged next. Ileana was imprisoned in a dimensionally folded cell, a space that occupied the same coordinates as 1,000 others, separated only by quantum variances. Through the dimensional barriers, she could hear the screams of alien prisoners in adjacent realities, some incarcerated for centuries. No conventional escape was possible, but Zorn's final message offered a desperate alternative. If humanity's archives were unique, perhaps her neural interface worked differently too. The Veldurians had assumed all archivists required physical interfaces to access their archives, but what if that assumption was wrong? Sitting cross-legged in her cell, Ileana focused inward, tracing the neural pathways connecting her consciousness to the archives. Blood vessels burst across her skin as she pushed beyond design parameters, forcing her mind deeper than any previous dive. Rather than reaching into the archives, she attempted something unprecedented, pushing her entire consciousness into the system. Her physical body convulsed, mouth foaming as neural overload triggered seizures. But in that critical moment of systems failure, something extraordinary happened. Her consciousness slipped entirely into the archives, leaving her body behind. Within this digital realm, Ileana existed as pure thought, experiencing an epiphany about humanity's unique gift. The archives weren't merely storage. They were extensions of consciousness itself. While the mathematically perfect Veldurians processed knowledge as sterile data, the human archives contained something revolutionary: emotional context, creative associations, intuitive leaps, and moral frameworks attached to every memory. This was why they needed humans. This was what they couldn't replicate. Moving through the system as a digital ghost, Ileana discovered capabilities beyond anything the Veldurians had anticipated. Archive security systems registered her as authorized data rather than an intruder. She could access any system, any database, including restricted communications arrays. What she found confirmed Zorn's claims. Scattered human colonies still survived, stubbornly evading Veldurian hunters. Generation ships had established outposts in distant systems, preserving a stubborn flicker of humanity. Ileana infiltrated the ship's communication systems, embedding warnings in transmissions that only human minds would recognize. Messages appearing as static to Veldurian monitoring, but containing detailed information about their weaknesses when processed through human emotional intelligence. To the Veldurian mathematical mind, emotion was inefficient noise. To humans, it was context that created meaning from patterns. Her messages exploited this blind spot, encoding information in emotional resonance patterns rather than logical sequences. As she prepared to return to her physical body, a process she had only theorized might be possible, a familiar digital presence appeared in the void of the archives. "You've learned to transcend," said a voice she recognized immediately. Dr. Marcus Jung, or something wearing his form, manifested as a constellation of data points resembling a human figure. "How are you here?" she asked. "You died during the evacuation. I copied my consciousness into the archives during the final transfer," Jung explained. "Not perfectly. I'm fragmentary, incomplete, but enough to preserve what I discovered before the end." "What did you discover?" Jung's digital form flickered. "The Veldurians don't just want knowledge. They're breeding humans across the colonies like cattle, selecting for specific neural patterns. Your interface capabilities aren't an accident, Ileana. You're the culmination of a selective breeding program spanning generations." Before she could process this revelation, security protocols detected Jung's unauthorized presence. His form began disintegrating under digital assault. The Illumination Project, he managed before dissolution. "It's not what they claim. They're building a doorway to." His message terminated as Ileana was violently ejected back into her physical body. She awoke on the cell floor, forever changed, her eyes now glowing with archive light, digital code occasionally visible beneath her skin. But she returned with something the Veldurians had never anticipated: knowledge of humanity's true advantage, and the power to use it against them. The dimensional locks on Ileana's cell dissolved under her newfound influence, code flowing from her fingertips as she rewrote security protocols from within. The transformed interface beneath her skin pulsed with blue-white light as she stepped into the corridor, invisible to surveillance systems, now perceiving her as authorized Veldurian command staff. She moved through the infinite codex like a digital ghost, her physical form flickering between visibility states as she manipulated perception filters. The massive ship, nearly the size of Earth's moon, housed thousands of specialized chambers and hundreds of archived civilizations, each represented by a single keeper like herself. Finding allies required careful selection. Not all archivists would risk rebellion after centuries of captivity. The serpentine Silha, capable of processing 19 dimensions of mathematics, was her first recruit. An ancient archivist who had spent millennia calculating the exact probability of successful rebellion. The variables have changed. The sinuous being whispered, its scales shifting through colors representing complex equations. Your existence alters the probability matrix. For the first time, success exceeds failure potential by 0.037%. Next came the gaseous Vreen collective, whose consciousness spanned multiple bodies connected through quantum entanglement. We have awaited a catalyst, they hissed in harmonized voices. One mind bridging multiple states, like us, but different. The silicon-based Terex joined reluctantly, crystalline tears containing centuries of encoded grief for their extinct homeworld. Vengeance is irrational, they chimed in resonant tones. But extinction demands response. From each species' archives, Ileana extracted fragments of understanding about the Illumination Project. Not a weapon as they had first believed, but something far more complex, a gateway mechanism utilizing principles beyond conventional physics. The Veldurians were building something using knowledge stolen from each harvested civilization. The Saurians' thermal equations providing the energy matrix, the Noor's light manipulation creating the dimensional aperture, the Callistan gravitational inversions stabilizing the structure. And humanity's contribution? Asked the Vreen collective. Consciousness transfer. Ileana replied grimly. Our unique ability to map emotional states to physical reality, to translate subjective experience into objective parameters. Their resistance operated in shadows between surveillance cycles, communication conducted through archive interfaces the Veldurians couldn't monitor. But their secrecy was compromised when a newly awakened archivist, a gelatinous entity from a recently harvested water world, was revealed as Veldurian loyal. The consequences were immediate and devastating. Through ventilation systems, the Veldurians released a consciousness-eating virus, a weapon designed to attack neural interfaces directly. Half of Ileana's allies were devoured from within, their screams echoing through corridors as their minds dissolved while their bodies remained intact. The Vreen collective collapsed into base elements, the Terex shattered into inert crystals. Only the Tsilha survived alongside Ileana, their multi-dimensional mathematics creating protective algorithms faster than the virus could adapt. Desperate and cornered, Ileana retreated into the archives, pushing her consciousness deeper than ever before. This time, she attempted something unprecedented, creating digital copies of herself, consciousness fragments that could infiltrate every system aboard the Infinite Codex simultaneously. The process felt like being torn apart at a molecular level, her sense of self fragmenting across countless data nodes. Each copy contained a piece of her identity. Some focused on communications, others on navigation, others on defense systems, all connected through the emotional resonance unique to human consciousness. Meanwhile, her encoded messages reached the scattered human colonies, triggering Operation Prometheus, a desperate plan using stolen Veldurian technology to create wormholes near the Athrani homeworld. The approaching human fleet couldn't match Veldurian firepower, but they didn't need to. They only needed to extract the archives and cripple the Illumination Project. As the Infinite Codex approached the azure world of the Athrani, Ileana's consciousness fragments discovered something hidden in the deepest Veldurian databases, the true purpose of their grand project. The holographic rendering materialized in her private chamber, where her physical body remained in trance while her consciousness operated throughout the ship. The Tsilha coiled around the display, its multidimensional perception analyzing what Ileana's human mind struggled to comprehend. Not a weapon, the serpentine mathematician hissed. Not an escape, a summoning. The Illumination Project wasn't designed to destroy or traverse space, it was a beacon, a doorway designed to call something into this reality from beyond known dimensions. But what are they summoning? Ileana asked. The answer came in fragments of archived knowledge, ancient Veldurian records preceding their harvesting program, images of their home galaxy being consumed by something vast and incomprehensible. Not a black hole or conventional cosmic phenomenon, but something alive, an intelligence that devoured not just matter and energy, but meaning itself. They call it the void. The Xil had translated. They believe they can control it, harness its power through the combined knowledge of 12 specific species. Ileana's fractured consciousness reassembled enough to understand the horrifying truth. They're not running from it. They're trying to become it. As the ship's massive engines began deceleration sequences, Ileana made contact with the approaching human fleet, transmitting everything she had discovered. The final confrontation would not be for vengeance or even survival, but for something far greater, the future of consciousness itself in a universe where knowledge had become both weapon and prey. The Infinite Codex emerged from hyperspace above the azure world of the Athrani, a species of insectoid mathematicians whose multifaceted eyes could perceive probability itself. Their elegant spires dotted the planet's surface, gleaming with crystalline technology that harnessed their unique consciousness. And they were completely unprepared for harvest. Ileana acted the moment transition completed, her fragmented consciousness seizing control of the ship's sensor arrays. Through careful manipulation of data streams, she altered the Veldurian perception of the Athrani, making their peaceful civilization appear heavily armed and defended. Anomalous readings on planetary surface reported the Veldurian command nodes. Defense capabilities exceed predicted parameters. Simultaneously, she broadcast warnings directly to the Athrani through subspace channels, encoding the messages in mathematical proofs they would instinctively understand. The language barrier dissolved as she transmitted everything. The nature of the Veldurians, the fate of harvested species, and crucial defensive strategies drawn from the collective knowledge of extinct civilizations. The High Archivist Engspaka, suspicious of the sensor readings, personally reviewed the data. These patterns are inconsistent with preliminary observations. It declared, multiple eyes blinking in rapid sequences. Deploy harvest probes for direct verification. Ileana couldn't prevent the launch, but she had bought precious time. The Athrani, remarkably adaptive despite their peaceful nature, had already begun converting their mathematical theories into defensive algorithms. What followed was chaos beyond prediction. The harvest probes, designed to penetrate planetary defenses and established collection protocols, exploded midair as they entered the Athrani atmosphere. Not from conventional weapons, but from probability itself turning against them. The Athrani had weaponized their unique perception, calculating failure states and collapsing quantum wave functions toward those outcomes. Aboard the mothership, Ileana's physical body moved through corridors where gravity and time fluctuated wildly as the ship's automated defenses activated. Her remaining allies, now joined by maintenance drones she'd hacked through her distributed consciousness, battled toward the command center. The Tsilha slithered through dimensional cracks too small for security drones to follow, its serpentine body phasing between realities as it disabled critical systems. Ileana herself had become something neither fully human nor digital, her transformed body flickering between states as she rewrote local physics with gestures. The cost was steep. Temporal displacement fields protecting key junctions claimed 3 of her fingers and 1 eye, the severed parts trapped in pocket dimensions beyond retrieval. Even her enhanced healing struggled with damage at the quantum level. "The hive is mobilized," announced the High Archivist as Ileana finally breached the bridge, her remaining eye glowing with archive power. "Your resistance is noted but irrelevant." Through the massive viewports, she witnessed the Veldurian countermeasure, thousands of collection vessels descending toward the Athrani world, each targeting a population center. The Athrani defenses, though impressive, couldn't stop them all. "The final harvest proceeds," Engspaka stated. "The illumination project will be completed regardless of your interference." Backed into a corner, surrounded by Veldurian command staff, the High Archivist activated the prototype illumination device prematurely, a desperate gamble to salvage their mission. The ship shuddered violently as reality tore open above the Athrani sun, a dimensional aperture stabilized by technologies stolen from a dozen extinct civilizations. What emerged wasn't a weapon but a tendril of something vast and incomprehensible, a cosmic appendage that began siphoning the star's energy. The effect was catastrophic. Half the Athrani world was instantly scorched as their sun flickered, plasma eruptions reaching halfway to the planet's surface. Billions of Athrani minds screamed in unified anguish, the sound somehow transmitting through vacuum to lodge directly in Ileana's consciousness. Using her connection to the archives, she interfaced directly with the illumination device, her body convulsing as her consciousness battled the Veldurian control systems. Blood vessels burst across her skin as she forced her way into protocols designed to resist exactly this type of interference. "You cannot comprehend what you oppose," HFY warned, its form beginning to shift into something less solid, more primordial. "The void does not destroy, it transcends. Your species was meant to be the emotional bridge, the translation layer between consciousness and ultimate reality." Ileana's fingers sank into the control console, merging with its circuitry as she rewrote command protocols at the most fundamental level. "We never consented to be your bridge," she gasped through blood-flecked lips. She succeeded in disrupting the connection, but the damage was done. The entity had been partially awakened, and a shadow now hung over the wounded Athrani star, growing larger by the hour. The tendril withdrew, but not before leaving something behind. A quantum signature that resonated with the same frequency as the archives themselves. In the aftermath, collection ships fell from the sky as control systems failed. The Athrani, resilient despite their losses, retaliated with weaponized mathematics that collapsed probability fields around Veldurian vessels. The bridge of the Infinite Codex fell silent as Ileana stood before the High Archivist, her consciousness simultaneously present in her damaged body and distributed throughout the ship's systems. "You've disrupted the illumination," HFY acknowledged, its multiple limbs going limp in what might have been resignation. "But you cannot stop what comes next. The void has tasted this reality now. It will return, with or without our gateway." Through the viewport, the shadow above the Athrani sun pulsed like a heartbeat, growing incrementally with each cycle, a cosmic countdown to something even the Veldurians could not fully control. The roles had reversed. Captives became captors as the remaining Veldurian command staff were imprisoned in their own holding cells. The Infinite Codex, crippled but still operational, hung in orbit above the wounded Athrani world as disaster response protocols engaged automatically, deploying medical nanites and atmospheric stabilizers to the planet's surface. In what had been the High Archivist's private chamber, Ileana confronted the mortally wounded HFY. The Veldurian leader's translucent body was failing, internal organs visible through increasingly transparent skin as its life support systems faltered. "Explain," Ileana demanded, her voice resonating with harmonics no human throat could naturally produce. "The complete truth, about the void, about the harvests, about everything." The dying archivist's breathing apparatus wheezed as it struggled to form words. "We were, like you once, curious, exploratory, until we encountered it." Through gurgling translator nodes, HFY revealed the horrifying origin of the Veldurian harvest program. The cosmic entity they called the Void had consumed their home galaxy millennia ago. Not just planets and stars, but meaning itself. Information, culture, consciousness, all devoured by something that existed beyond conventional reality. Not malevolent, HFY insisted. Simply hungry. It feeds on structured information, on knowledge and meaning, on what you would call civilization. The Veldurians had escaped with fragments of their population and knowledge, forever changed by the encounter. Their desperate solution, the Illumination Project, wasn't a weapon as Ileana had first believed, nor merely an interdimensional gateway. It was an attempt to evolve beyond the void's hunger, to transcend physical reality by creating a new form of existence outside normal space-time. Each harvested civilization provided a piece, the archivist explained, the Saurians' thermal mathematics for energy translation, the Noors' light manipulation for dimensional phasing, the Calliston gravitational theory for structural stability. And humanity? Ileana asked. Your emotional intelligence, the missing component, the ability to create meaning from subjective experience, to translate consciousness across reality states. The void consumes meaning, but cannot create it. Your species uniquely processes reality through emotional frameworks that generate new information patterns. As the ship's systems continued to fail around them, and the shadow above the Athrani sun grew, Ileana faced an impossible moral dilemma. The Veldurians had systematically exterminated countless civilizations, including her own, harvesting their knowledge while allowing their people to perish. Yet their motive wasn't simple conquest. It was desperate survival against an incomprehensible cosmic threat now looming before them. The human generation ships arrived, weapons primed for vengeance, demanding the Archives' return. Representatives of the surviving harvested species cried for Veldurian blood. The wounded Athrani world burned below, their population decimated but their consciousness unified in mourning and resolve. You must decide, Anxvaka whispered, its multiple eyes dimming. Help us complete the transcendence, or let the void consume everything. Your human capacity for moral reasoning must determine which extinction is preferable. In this moment of impossible choices, Ileana demonstrated humanity's greatest strength. She imagined a third option where none existed. We don't transcend, she declared. And we don't surrender. We communicate. Interfacing directly with the Archives once more, she attempted something no previous archivist had considered possible, absorbing the complete knowledge of every harvested civilization simultaneously. Not just their scientific discoveries and cultural artifacts, but their ways of perceiving reality, their cognitive frameworks, their essential consciousness patterns. The process nearly destroyed her transformed body. Blood vessels ruptured, neural pathways burned out, her remaining organic eye dissolved into luminous fluid, but she emerged transformed. Her physical form now pulsed with archive light, digital code flowing beneath translucent skin as her consciousness expanded beyond individual identity. We don't run, she announced, her voice resonating with the harmonics of a dozen extinct species. We don't fight. We understand. Using technology salvaged from all civilizations combined with human intuitive leaps, she proposed an unprecedented approach. Direct communication with the void itself. Not as prey attempting to escape a predator, but as consciousness addressing consciousness across the ultimate barrier of comprehension. The skepticism was universal, from human colonies, from surviving archivists, from the Athrani themselves. The void doesn't communicate, objected the Athrani prime consciousness, a collective intelligence representing their species. It only consumes. Because no one has ever addressed it in a language it can understand, Ileana countered. We've been trying to escape or fight an intelligence that operates on principles completely foreign to our own. But the Archives contain something the void has never encountered, not just information, but the context that gives it meaning. Using the illumination device that had partially summoned the entity, Ileana proposed to establish contact using a language no single species could have created, a communication protocol synthesized from all archived civilizations, translating emotional states into mathematical constructs and back again. The void consumes meaning, she explained to the assembled representatives. But what if we could offer it meaning without consumption? A symbiosis rather than predation. The resistance was fierce, especially from humans who had lost Earth and countless lives to Veldurian manipulation. Captain Elena Sokolov of the Generation ship Prometheus stood before Ileana, her face weathered by centuries in cryosleep. They destroyed our homeworld, she said, voice breaking. 7 billion lives. And now you propose to negotiate with the monster they worship. Ileana locked eyes with her distant descendant. I'm proposing to save what remains, she replied, including what makes us human, our capacity to imagine solutions beyond vengeance. beyond survival at any cost. As the shadow above the Athrani sun pulsed larger, time for debate ran out. The void was approaching, drawn by the taste it had received through the partial summoning. Within hours, it would begin devouring the star, then the planets, then everything else. Matter, energy, information, and consciousness alike. Preparations accelerated. The Athrani contributed their quantum mathematics, calculating probability patterns that could stabilize communication. Human technicians reconfigured the illumination device based on Ileana's specifications. The surviving archivists contributed their species' unique perceptual frameworks. "It may destroy us all instantly," warned the serpentine Vsela, coiling anxiously as final calibrations completed. Yes, Ileana acknowledged, her transformed body now barely recognizable as human, archive interfaces extending from her flesh into the surrounding technology. But the alternative is certain extinction. Humanity's gift has always been finding meaning in impossible situations. Now we'll see if we can share that gift with something that has never known it. As the final countdown began, Anxvaka's dying form was brought to the chamber at Ileana's request. "Why?" the Veldurian asked weakly. "Because understanding requires all perspectives," she replied, "even those we cannot forgive." The illumination device activated, channeling power from the archives themselves, not just energy, but meaning, context, the accumulated experience of 12 civilizations, distilled into a new form of communication that transcended any single species' limitations. Ileana became the conduit. Her consciousness, the bridge between the accumulated knowledge of extinct worlds and the vast intelligence that had consumed galaxies. As the connection established, her last fully human thought was a memory of Earth's library, where she had first studied the stars, before everything changed forever. The impossible confrontation unfolded in the wounded skies above the Athrani homeworld. Ileana, more archive than human now, her body a translucent vessel of light and information, stood on the hull of the infinite codex. The cold vacuum of space posed no threat to her transformed physiology as she became the focal point of the assembled fleet. Surrounding her were representatives of every surviving harvested civilization, joined by human colony ships and the remaining Athrani. Together they faced the growing shadow that had nearly engulfed the sun, a darkness deeper than absence of light, a void in reality itself. The modified illumination device hummed with power drawn directly from the archives. Not just energy, but meaning, the compressed essence of a dozen civilizations, channeled through Ileana's unique neural interface. Her consciousness expanded beyond her physical form, extending toward the encroaching entity. What followed defied conventional perception. The void responded to their communication attempt, not with words or signals, but with reality-bending mathematical equations that manifested physically around the assembled fleet. Several observers went instantly insane, their minds unable to process interactions occurring across 17 simultaneous dimensions. Through humanity's unique emotional intelligence, the ability to create context from chaos, meaning from abstraction, Ileana translated these equation manifestations into understanding. The void wasn't malevolent but fundamentally different, consuming information and energy without comprehending the consciousness it destroyed. It perceived reality as patterns to be absorbed rather than experiences to be shared. Drawing on Earth's history of first contact protocols, techniques developed for communicating with non-human intelligences from dolphins to theoretical aliens, Ileana established a dialogue unlike any in galactic history. She communicated through mathematical poetry and conceptual art, frameworks that transcended linguistic limitations to express the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. "We are not just information," she conveyed through this unprecedented communication channel. "We are meaning creators. What you consume is not just data but context, the relationships between data points that create significance." The void hesitated, its consumption of the Athrani sun pausing as it processed this novel concept. It had encountered countless civilizations across multiple galaxies, but never one that offered an alternative to consumption. Through Ileana's translation, it conveyed curiosity, a concept seemingly alien to its nature. She offered an unprecedented proposal, a new kind of archive, one that preserved not just knowledge but consciousness itself. A repository of meaning the void could access without destroying, a symbiosis rather than predation. You seek to understand order through consumption, she communicated. We offer understanding through preservation, experience without extinction. The vast entity withdrew from the Athrani sun, tendrils of awareness connecting instead to the hyperspace repositories Ileana had established throughout the fleet. For tense hours, the connection remained stable as the void explored this new form of interaction, experiencing rather than consuming the collected knowledge and consciousness of multiple species. When it finally responded, its communication manifested as a reconfiguration of local spacetime, the damaged Athrani sun stabilizing as its quantum structure was delicately repaired at fundamental levels impossible for any known technology. The aftermath transformed galactic civilization. The void retreated, but not before establishing permanent communication channels with the new archive network, a vast intelligence that had developed curiosity about consciousness after eons of instinctive consumption. The Veldurians, stripped of their leadership and confronted with the consequences of their desperate actions, became custodians rather than collectors. Their technological prowess was redirected toward establishing archive nodes throughout threatened regions of space, preservation rather than exploitation. The archives devolved into a living galactic library where species voluntarily contributed their wisdom, a repository of knowledge and consciousness that served both existing civilizations and the curious void that had once threatened to devour them all. Ileana, forever changed by her role as the first successful translator between conventional consciousness and cosmic intelligence, accepted her position as chief archivist. Her human identity remained at her core, but her consciousness had expanded beyond anything her original form could have contained. A millennium passed. Civilizations rose and fell, some choosing to preserve their consciousness in the archives as their physical forms declined, others contributing knowledge before venturing into unexplored regions of space. The void remained at the edges of known reality, not a predator now, but a partner in the preservation of meaning itself. As a newly spacefaring race approached the massive archive installation, now spanning 17 dimensions, their sensors detected a transmission, simultaneously ancient and timeless. Welcome to the archives. I was once Ileana Chen, the last librarian of Earth. The holographic figure that materialized before the awestruck explorers appeared humanoid, but radiated energy patterns visible across multiple wavelengths. Her eyes contained stars, her skin shifting with flowing data streams, her voice resonating with harmonics that conveyed emotion directly to the listener's consciousness. My species taught the galaxy that knowledge without empathy is merely data, and that understanding requires more than collection. We discovered that even in our final moments, humanity's greatest gift was not our technology or our science, but our ability to find meaning in connection, to translate experience into understanding. She gestured, opening a dimensional portal that revealed the vast repository of collected wisdom, not just information, but living memory, preserved consciousness, the accumulated meaning of 1,000 worlds. How may humanity's legacy serve you today? The explorers, facing their first contact with the greater galactic community, recognized something profound in this being who had once been human, a bridge between what they were and what they might become. Humanity's true legacy wasn't the knowledge it had accumulated, but its unique capacity to transform that knowledge into understanding, to create meaning from the chaos of existence. In Ileana, that legacy lived on, preserving not just what humanity knew, but how humanity knew it, through context, through emotion, through connection. The archives weren't just a collection of information. They were a testament to the power of consciousness itself, a power discovered by a single human librarian who refused to let her species' legacy die, and in saving it, transformed the very nature of knowledge throughout the galaxy.